Right now, you are processing thousands of pieces of information per second. The words I am saying, the tone I am using, what they mean, what they imply, what they leave unsaid. You are doing all of this effortlessly because you have language, a system so deeply embedded in your brain that you cannot remember learning it. You simply woke up one day and it was there. But there was a time, a very long time, when none of that existed. No words, no sentences, no names for things, no way to say I am afraid, or follow me, or I love you, or the predator is coming from the left. And yet, ancient humans survived. They hunted together, they raised children together, they built shelters, crossed oceans, and painted the walls of caves with images so precise and so intentional that they still take your breath away today. So how did they do it? The answer, as it turns out, is far more sophisticated than anyone expected, and it changes something fundamental about what we think it means to be human. How did ancient humans communicate before language even existed? First, let us understand the scale of the problem. Modern linguists believe that fully developed spoken language, the kind with grammar, syntax, and complex meaning, is probably somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 years old. Some researchers push it even earlier, to around 200,000 years ago. But here's the thing, anatomically modern humans have existed for at least 300,000 years, and our evolutionary ancestors, the hominins who came before us, were walking upright, making tools, and living in social groups for millions of years before that. That is a gap of potentially millions of years. Millions of years of beings who were intelligent enough to knap flint into blades, who knew which plants were poisonous, who cared for their injured and buried their dead, doing all of it without a single word. So what were they using instead? Scientists have spent decades trying to answer this, and what they have pieced together from fossil records, primate behavior studies, and neuroscience is a communication system so layered and so complex that calling it primitive would be completely wrong. The first thing to understand is that communication did not begin with the mouth, it began with the body. Gesture almost certainly predates speech. We know this because the same regions of the brain that control hand movement and gesture are deeply connected to the regions that later develop language. Broca's area, and the part of your brain most responsible for producing speech, is also heavily involved in processing hand gestures. They share neural real estate. That is not a coincidence. Our closest living relatives confirm this. Chimpanzees and bonobos use dozens of intentional gestures to communicate specific meanings. Raise an arm to signal follow me. Touch a hand to request grooming. Extend a hand palm up to beg. These are not random movements. They are deliberate signals understood by every member of the group. Early hominins almost certainly did the same, but with far greater complexity. Point at the horizon and look alarmed. Mime the shape of an animal with your hands. Indicate direction by turning your whole body. These are not words, but they carry meaning. But gesture has a fundamental limitation. It only works when people can see each other. In the dark, across a valley, in thick forest, gesture fails completely, and so something else developed alongside it. Before words, there was sound. Not language, sound. And the distinction matters enormously. Think about the sounds humans make that are not words. A sharp intake of breath when something surprises you. A low growl when something threatens you. A high-pitched cry when something hurts. A specific rhythm of exhaled breath that means I am laughing and I am safe and you can relax. These sounds are universal. Every human culture on Earth, no matter how isolated, produces and understands them identically. That universality is the fingerprint of something very old, something that predates language and culture entirely. Researchers studying our closest primate relatives have cataloged dozens of distinct vocalizations, alarm calls that specify not just danger, but what kind of danger and from which direction, a specific call for eagle, a different call for snake, a third for leopard, each one triggering a different response from the group without a single word being spoken. Early hominins almost certainly had similar systems, call libraries that conveyed specific situations. And over millions of years, those calls became more refined, more precise, more intentional, until one day, and we genuinely do not know when or exactly how, they crossed a threshold into something we would recognize as language. But here's the part of this story that most people miss entirely. Communication is not just about survival signals. It is also about passing knowledge from one generation to the next. And ancient humans were doing that long before language existed. The evidence is carved into stone. There is a concept in anthropology called action-based learning, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You watch, you imitate, you practice, you are corrected by demonstration, not by instruction. We know this is how early stone tool technology was transmitted because of something remarkable that researchers noticed when they tried to recreate it. Making an Acheulean hand axe, the standard tool of early hominins for over 1 million years, requires a precise sequence of about 50 to 100 distinct strikes in a specific order. If you do one strike wrong early in the sequence, the whole tool fails. That knowledge was transmitted across thousands of generations, across hundreds of thousands of years, with no written instructions, no verbal explanation, pure demonstration and imitation. And then there are the caves. The cave paintings of Lascaux, of Altamira, of Chauvet, some of them 40,000 years old, depict animals with a level of observational accuracy that took European art thousands of years to rediscover. They show movement. They use the contours of the rock to create three-dimensionality. Some of them were painted in complete darkness, deep inside cave systems, by people working from pure memory. Those paintings were almost certainly not decoration, they were communication, records, possibly instructions, maybe ritual, maybe maps of animal migration routes. We do not know for certain, but we know they were made deliberately, in specific places, by people who expected other people to see them and understand them. The precise moment language emerged is one of the great unsolved questions of science. We will probably never know exactly when the first true sentence was spoken, because language leaves no fossil. But what we do know is this: when language did emerge, it was not a sudden invention. It was the final layer of a communication system that had been building for millions of years. Gesture, vocalization, demonstration, shared ritual, visual art, language grew out of all of these. It was the culmination, not the beginning. I want to sit with something for a moment. When we think about ancient humans without language, we tend to imagine something diminished, something less than us, grunting figures stumbling through a world they barely understood. But the evidence does not support that picture at all. What the evidence shows is beings who are reading each other with extraordinary precision, who understood the emotional state of every person in their group from the set of their shoulders and the rhythm of their breathing, who could coordinate a hunt involving multiple individuals across a large area using signals we can only partially reconstruct, who transmitted complex technical knowledge across hundreds of generations without losing a single step in the process. In some ways, and I say this carefully, they may have been better communicators than we are. Because when you cannot rely on words, you become extraordinarily attentive to everything else. You read the world and the people in it with a depth and precision that most of us have completely lost. Language gave us everything, but it may also have made us lazy in ways we have never fully reckoned with. The next time you're sitting with someone you care about and neither of you says anything for a while, notice what is still being communicated, the way they hold their body, the sound of their breathing, whether they are tense or at ease, whether the silence between you feels comfortable or uncomfortable. You are reading all of that automatically without a single word. That ability is not modern. It is not something civilization taught you. It is millions of years old. It was keeping your ancestors alive long before the first word was ever spoken. Language is the newest thing about you. Everything underneath it is ancient. If that made you think, subscribe. We cover the deep questions about what it means to be human. I will see you in the next one.